161 millones de latinoamericanos y caribeños aún no cuentan con acceso a agua segura y más de 430 millones todavía no tienen acceso seguro a saneamiento. Esta realidad pone en peligro la salud de millones de personas en la región y requiere de un aumento sustancial.
This calls for a substantial increase in infrastructure investment for these sectors and regulatory and institutional frameworks ensuring water governance for equitable and affordable access to all inhabitants in the region. How can we enhance public-private investments, ensuring for environmental balance and other aspects that help us accomplish the ODS, SDGs. Finance and governance of water in Latin America and the Caribbean towards Dakar. This is an event that gathers different public, private, multilateral and civil society organizations and authorities to learn about the main initiatives undertaken by the different countries on this topic and consolidate the regional approach towards hydric water and in accomplishment of SDG, finance and governance of water in Latin America and the Caribbean towards Dakar 2022. Welcome, CAF, the Latin American Development Bank. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Alejandro Marceiras. Welcome to the second session of this Water Governance and Finance Conference of Latin America and the Caribbean towards Dakar 2022, organized by CAF in preparation to the 9th World Water Council. This council was established in 1996 to mobilize critical aspects regarding water, and regularly the council carries out the most important forum, the 9th World Forum, to take place in Senegal, Dakar 2022. During this virtual conference, we have high-quality panel, and we will discuss the different initiatives carried out by civil society, private, public institutions regarding finance and governance of water. The idea is to consolidate the vision of Latin America and the Caribbean regarding water, specific recommendations, success cases, to put them together in a summary report in preparation to the 9th World Water Council. This document will be the expression of the continent that represents more than 30% of water resources, with major successes but facing also many challenges. Before kicking off, I would like you to join us in different social media, hashtag hacia Dakar 2022, and follow the different Agenda CAF. We do have simultaneous interpretation into English and Portuguese. You can access through your devices. And as we said yesterday, we will continue playing the videos from different authorities, water authorities in Latin America and the Caribbean. Good morning, everybody. I would like to share with you the progress made in Argentina in compliance with SDG number 6 in order to cover 100% of the country's water and sanitation needs. We are resuming the investment path that over the past 4 years was not undertaken. It went down to 3.1% of the GDP. We are doubling the investments in water and sanitation. This started in 2019 with the pandemic, and we look forward to increasing coverage and works, reaching places where we did not reach before, for example, indigenous people communities and faraway communities. Along these lines, we are trying to reduce inequality in the distribution of resources and expanding coverage in the 4,000 precarious or poor settlements in the country. So that is our plan for the next 10 years. My welcome to all. And my regards from all the authorities from my country. The short and long term for our constitutional government include reducing gap water and sanitation coverages, and in rural populations it is very important to use non-conventional technologies. With regard to droughts and flooding, very briefly, we need to put together contingency plans with specific protocol regarding disasters. Our country, Bolivia, has been working in the urbanization of drinking water and sanitation under Law 650, and the policy for the implementation of human right water prioritize this access to the poorest populations, and this is in line with SDG number 6. This is from the Ministry of Bolivia. Welcome you all. I would like to start by thanking this invite by CAF, the Latin American Development Bank, to share with you our vision, UNDP, United Nations Development Program, regarding water governance. The challenge of water from governance point of view implies a holistic approach of all institutional frameworks that define who has access, when and how and at what cost people can access water. We have multi-participating approaches at both national, regional and local levels. We support the creation of institutions, the development of capabilities for sharing participation of the different water resources. Our offering includes cross-bordering, national, regional proposals supporting governments and other stakeholders to reform policies or implement action plans under the governance proposal. These policies generate the appropriate environment for technological innovation and to attract indirect investment towards the implementation of agreed upon measures. We see, for example, an integrated implementation in 22 transboundary plans, including different types of resources with the support and the finance of the UNDP. So I encourage you to visit our report, What Works in the Governance of Water and Oceans, that was published by our institution in 2019. The world water crisis is mainly a governance crisis rather than availability of water. Thank you very much. So let's dive into the first panel, water governance. It is a factor that establishes dynamic balance, sensitive balance between increasing demands for water use and the ability to respond by decision makers. In order to achieve this balance, we need an adequate institutionality of basin systems, including corporate governance in regulation, water supply services, as well as effective and legitimate management tools. The first panel makes reference to governance in water resource management. The moderator is Edgar Salas, Director of Sustainability, Inclusion and Climate Change with CAF. Mr. Salas, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. Good morning to all our panel members and all the attendees to this conference, this second session. As you mentioned before, the first panel has to do with the governance of water resource management. Governance directed towards an integrated management of water resources. This is a concept, is a very dynamic one, involving different processes, mechanisms of interaction between governmental and non-governmental players. That is to say, there is an interrelation of formal and informal structures, procedures, and systems of implementing rules, the different stakeholders and networks among local, global networks within the or under the context of sustainable development. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, rather a set of options based on diversity of the legal, administrative and organizational frameworks of each country. And some time ago, we tried to put together some basic water governance principles. These criteria recognize that governance is context dependent. Water policies should accommodate to the different water and territorial specificities, and governance response should be adjusted to changing circumstances. Good governance should include legitimacy, transparency, accountability, and compliance with the rule of law, human rights. Water governance also is intended for a purpose. Is a range of practical rules and procedures, both formal and informal, political, administrative, institutional, that help the implementation of decisions and also make possible for different stakeholders to articulate their interest and that their concerns be taken into account, and decision makers are made accountable for their management. As the OECD establishes, water governance help manage extremes. Little water, a lot of water, contaminated water in a reasonable way, in a reasonable period of time. So all these challenges under the climate change scenario are even more serious because extremes are more significant and more frequent, and therefore the competition for the resource and water conflicts increased as well. In the different seminars, we recognize that governance is good, helps resolve different key water-related issues from a bottom-top and top-down approach, and drive different relationships between the government and the society. Governance is not good if it increases cost or if it does not meet the needs of each context. So in order to discuss about these topics and the different regional experiences, let me share our panel of experts. Alexandra Moreira, she's the General Secretary of OTCA and a lawyer and environmental law expert, and she's Chief Cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Chief of the Unity of Mother Earth in Bolivia, and she was also advisor to the Embassy in Mexico and Minister of the Environment between 2015-2017. Since 2019, she is responsible for the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. Berta Alicia Ormedo, Executive Secretary of SICA, Hydraulic Resource Regional Committee. She got her degree in statistics at the University of Panama. She is specialized in different topics in Costa Rica. She has been a consultant for different international agencies, climatology head at TESA, and she is a standing representative for Panama at the WMO and member of the Committee of Latin America, Mr. Juan Carlos Alurralde, General Secretary of the Intergovernmental Committee of Del Plata Basin. She has a degree from the Catholic University, Deputy Minister of International Affairs in Bolivia in 2017, and he participated in the declaration of water and sanitation as human rights, the Declaration of Indigenous People, and other declarations. Currently, she is Secretary General of the Intergovernmental Committee of the El Plata Basin Coordination. So, first of all, my thanks to all the participants and panel members. So, I would like to kick off by asking one question to each of our participants, and please try to stick to the time allocated to each of you, which is approximately 7 minutes. So, as I mentioned, OTCA, the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, is an intergovernmental organization including Amazon countries that signed the OTCA: Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela. The purpose is to build synergies among the governments, multilateral agencies, cooperation agencies, civil society, social movements, scientific community, and production sectors. This implies a lot of effort to reach consensus, coordination, and cooperation in the largest basin in the world. So, Alexandra, which are the lessons learned about the sustainable use of the water resource that you can share, considering the impacts of climate change based on the OTCA experience? What are the institutional agreement and South cooperation agreement are in place from OTCA in terms of water in Amazonia? Thank you very much. I would like to, first of all, read CAF. We thank for the invite, and my welcome also to the other panel members, Mr. Alurralde, Ms. Olmedo. Understanding this from a technical point of view and understanding that this is the largest basin is very complex, that requires interconnected measures at different scalable levels. That is very important for the management of this ecosystem. Having a common view that is shared by all the countries for an integrated management of water resources and for hydric security has resulted in a technical and political agreement. And we have a regulatory framework to manage the different resources. We've seen that in the last working group report of IPCC, there is a more realistic approach towards the regional approach, showing that the climate change is affecting the hydrological system, increasing the number of rainfalls and floodings, scenarios that were planned for 2015, but now we know that in the next 20-30 years we will face this type of disasters. So this is a reality that is affecting more than 48 million inhabitants in the Amazonia. We are witnessing the setback of different glaciers, the frequency of intensity of flooding, droughts, increase of the sea level, and other impacts on the Amazonia Delta. So OTCA countries have been working to address these challenges. Back in 2018, they agreed to implement the strategic action plan, and we've been working in the implementation of this plan. I believe that it is very important to move from the planning to the implementation of specific actions. And on November 30th, we will launch the implementation project of strategic actions. I invite you to this event, and we will also present our atlas of vulnerabilities in the region. This is a planning tool to respond to the management of water resources, management of disasters, because you will be able to see or receive technical information about the different sensitivity levels, the availability to adapt to climate change, taking into account social, economical, and biophysical aspects. And let me give you a couple of examples about what we are working on, because we need to put together institutional frameworks. This implies consensus, negotiations within the countries, not only from OTCA towards the focal points, but within the different countries.
And outside it, with different organizations cooperating with us, both technical, scientific, and financing institutions. We're implementing, for instance, 10 priorities of our strategic plan: the environment, the gaps, and also we will expand the areas related to management of solid waste and water with the Inter-American Development Bank, by analyzing the availability of water for basic service provision, generating a strategic plan, a cross-border plan. That's what we think it's important, the border areas work. We will therefore develop a regional module of information and knowledge of water and innovation, mainly for service providers. And we are about to start with CEPAL, inequality and structural gaps analysis, and with an emphasis on these basic services. Among specific actions, I can also mention the work we're doing not only at national, binational, trinational actions, which is another challenge on negotiations, because countries should agree and cooperate to implement these binational, trinational projects. We are about to implement early alert programs on floodings and fires in the region of Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru. The introduction of nature-based solutions to protect coastal area ecosystems, the supply of alternative water supply due to the lack of glaciers in Bolivia and Peru, and other projects we are working on with the cooperation of different countries. On the other hand, I think it's highly important that we started with the IDB mixed approach, generating simulation of water scenarios and introducing sector planning based on energy, water, and food, identifying investment needs and the possibilities of articulated management to increase the prioritization of the water sector in our countries, both in planning and the economic sector. As I mentioned, in each country, there are complex situations to move forward on this. But each organization, with the trust we've received from the different countries over the 20 years of actions, this helps the development of these initiatives and activities, which are not only diagnosis and planning, but also mature and start implementing actions for a change that could support country policies. And the more we connect with countries with public policies, the more useful we will become as an organization. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandra. No doubt, the IPCC report shows a regional analysis highlighting the Amazonic system, which is not only an internal regulator of the basin, but also shows the availability of resources in the southern cone. We've seen severe incidents on water levels in the south. I also highlight the cross-border nature of this plan, as nature does not acknowledge political borders. Nature is based on these shared systems. Thank you, Alexandra. I will now go to Berta Alicia Olmedo. I'll first like to mention that as is a Central American regional cooperation project, the institutional framework created by the states of Costa Rica, Panama, with the addition of Belize and the Dominican Republic, based on peace, democracy, and development, is a highly representative organization in the region. Berta Alicia, I would like to ask you what's your relevant experience on the improvement and consolidation of governance of water among Central American and Caribbean countries, particularly the integration of countries' agenda to manage climatic risks in the region, seriously affected by the exacerbated climate change. Thank you very much, Edgar. Good morning to all the panelists. We thank the opportunity to share with you, the audience, some of the experiences from the Central American region. The Regional Committee of Water Resources was created in 1966 during the water energy development process of the region, and has hence become an organization working to promote information, to generate information that could be useful for decision makers in the Central American region. It has generated alliances with other instances of the Central American alliance, and therefore the information can be shared with other socioeconomic sectors of the Central American region, and therefore made timely decisions to manage the risks of the climate changes exacerbated by the climate change. There are several experiences that we can share with the audience. One of the oldest one is the Central American Climate Forum, created in 2020, an organization with 6 countries, member of this organization, from Belize to Panama, allowing for the generation of information on what will happen in the coming months on climate changes as to rainfall, climate, weather, the San Juan summer, for instance, the beginning of rainfall season, and this information is shared with users. This is another regional exercise, the forum to apply seasonal forecast for food safety. We here share different physical spaces with what we call tables. These tables are led by the secretaries of each of the institutions. For instance, coffee and agriculture, water and sanitation, risk management, fishing, and others that I can't remember now, but there are 6 tables participating energy as well to share this information with system institutions, and these institutions can thus behave as scale actions so that this information can get to national and local level. So in addition to this regional fora, work is being done at more local institutions, local tables with the stakeholders generating the information, working on information with information users. I would also like to highlight that this work model of application fora has been appreciated by the World Climate Forecast Organization, shared as good practices that could be replicated in other regions of the world. We also have the integration of the Central American Hydrological Forum, an extremely valuable institution, a collective organization of hydrological professionals from the different countries gathering on based on the results of the World Climate Forum to generate models that can have hydrological forecasts in the Central American region. This has also been extremely valued by the World Climate Forecast or Weather Forecast Organization as an exercise that can be replicated in other parts of the world. There's also an important decision closely related to the issue we are addressing, the scale reduction of climate change for Central American. This scale reduction is available for all Central American users, known as the Central American view of climate change scenarios. There are around 48 models applying dynamic and statistical modeling available to make decisions and work on those models, adjust them and see which one works better for the system or the sector and become the chain linking all the actions on climate change in Central American. I mean, all the countries normally work in isolation on climate change under different approaches and different scenarios, different methodologies. Through this tool, we have all the countries under the same approach, and therefore the results for one country could be compared to other. But there's something very important that I always highlight. It will enable the region of Central America as a bloc can face the climate change organization to negotiate as a region and not isolated as individual countries. We also think this is a very valuable tool for what I have just mentioned. It is important to consider that Central America is a region with high water potential. There are countries with 300 milliliters annual average of water availability, and therefore we're rich in water, but also water excess generated by climate change variations, for instance, hurricanes, such as last year, Eta and Iota, with a couple of weeks in between, resulting in water excess and with consequences in the rest of the region. And we also have the Central American dry region, a region that is normally affected by water shortages and droughts. In 2015, 2016, the drought that generated food shortages and hunger and even death in Central America is to be highlighted. Therefore, our institution is strongly working to generate information on events that will generate excess rainfall, and also monitors through the regional platform that we will shortly launch on December the 6th. We will be launching a regional platform, a virtual hub to feed the regional, the Central American region to see the same event, generating the reports that could properly inform the institutions in the region that should make decisions, such as cyclones, tropical weather events, through such as the droughts that are shown by this tool. This virtual hub can have the best talents for all the region, because we can share the same system and communicate the possibilities of impact in the region. These are the main examples of all good practices that we can mention from this institution. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bertalicia. It has been really helpful. As Alejandra mentioned, it is important to go from planning to action with small things, but I especially highlight the coordination and the coordinated work among Latin American countries. I would like to mention that the executive president has established as a priority this exchange, not only of technologies, but also information from our countries to address with more success chances. Thank you very much again for your comments. Now I'll go to our third guest, Juan Carlos Alurralde. I would like to mention that the Del Plata Basin is one of the largest in the region, with 5 intervening countries, with 2.5 million kilometers, with great natural resources. It has fostered countries to develop efforts for its economic and social development, from the Intergovernmental Committee coordinating the basin, the Plata Basin, to promote and coordinate multinational actions in this macro basin. Juan Carlos, I'd like to ask you, what are the main experiences in water resources management to manage, recover, and the basins, biodiversity, and ecosystems? Particularly, the committee has generated the strategic actions report for priority lines, and we would therefore like to know what are the actions that you are developing on institutional arrangements for its implementation and improvement of basin management to further the actions of the countries. could you mention the main proposals on the actions on climate change? Thank you. Warm greetings to Edgar, and please to CAF and my colleagues, Alejandra and Berta. Also, warm greeting to the participants. Among the main experiences, we should highlight that since 2001, the governments of the 5 countries that formed SIC decided to include technical capacities to address the management of water resources jointly and agree an action plan as a guideline for the institution where water resources are key, including surface areas and underground surface water and underground water, and the interaction with the climate. For the first time, we are having integrated approach, building a shared view of the basin. We prioritize common problems. We also prioritize and establish the actions needed, and therefore in the subsequent stage we are developing programs, identifying challenges at basin level and the preliminary proposals to resolve and mitigate the already identified problems in the diagnosis, in cross-border diagnosis. Between 2010 and 2016, the framework program deepened this diagnosis, consolidating a cross-border analysis. And therefore develop a strategic actions plan, a key document for policies and priority actions, I highlight, agreed by the 5 countries to resolve the identified problems, mainly cross-border issues. We should also mention that this work has been developed with the intervention of more than 150 institutions and more than 1,500 specialists in the region that managed to articulate or agreed on wills and the interests of the different countries to find a common objective under the framework of climate change and variability. Under this framework of action, in 2019, we started to implement a medium report plan for the foundation of this strategic action plan. There's an agreement on the execution of this plan called PET. And in 2019, from 2019 to 2022, we are executing this project, whose main product would be the kickoff strengthening of support system for decision making, which has been developed by Deltares, a company whose purpose is to establish the basis for the integration of information on the basin and make it available to institutions requiring it, whether universities, national governments, subnational governments, any institution, the people in general of our basin. This is an ambitious and operating tool which we would like to offer from this institution to show the high-risk events such as floodings, droughts, water contamination, and alert on natural disasters or human-caused disasters. Also, under the framework of this medium-term report, we're working on technical administrative planning with the participation of all the countries present in the basin.
A very important item in our plan, because you were asking about the impact of climate change. In this regard, we can say that sharing or having a shared information management by the 5 countries, we have updated meteorological information in real time that is provided by the different countries and given to the 6 Secretariat. And then we have regional programs for automated measurements of the basin, of the Plata Basin quality monitoring, the development of an early warning environmental system that is going to be associated to the decision-making system from SIC to the 5 countries, the operationalization of this system for climate hydrological measurements. We have identified different vulnerable areas, and we have defined different proposals for the execution of the PAE that includes these strategies for climate change and the strategies for environmental vulnerability vis-a-vis extreme conditions. Now, for the sake of time, I would like to highlight that for the first time ever, all the 5 member countries built throughout this year and agreed on a shared proposal with regard to the UNFCCC, and that took place in Glasgow. And we provided a very important message. The proposal of the SIC has been shared with the international community by the pro tempore chair of the SIC, which is currently led by Bolivia. So at COP26, we have shown that Del Plata Basin can deal with all the problems related to the basin, but that there is a shared view with regard to the actions that should be taken under the different treaties, including the UNFCCC. We are in the process of being members of this convention, so as a result of this, we will be able to participate in the different debates that are very important for the humanity and for the materialization of the dreams of our basin. Well, Juan Carlos, very enlightening your comments, and thank you for sticking to the time. And I really value all the comments, the practical aspects, sharing information, having early warning systems, and what you mentioned, bringing efforts together to raise common issues to the international fora is paramount. That is the essence of governance. As a region, that is what we need to show. And thank you very much. And for the sake of time, now following the methodology, Hello, can you hear me? So, following the methodology, I will now ask a question to all the 3 panel members. One of the common characteristics in Latin America and the Caribbean is the multiple water stakeholders given to the fragmentation in regulation and water users. We have large water operators and very, very, very tiny community operators, industries to very small farmers. So government challenges are multiple when we talk about policies, capacity building, efficient management, transparency, and accountability, information and management instruments. So from your point of view, as regional organizations, who are the actors, or which are the mechanisms that help for an integrated water management, both internally or within the region and beyond? And Alexander, and please try to stick to 3 minutes in your answers, because I have a red traffic light. That is my concern. So having these reliable and inclusive organizations for multiple cooperation, that is paramount. That is to say, to try to ensure the management of water resources. In the case of OTCA is a key area with a regional and national view of the various country members that share this basin. We facilitate political dialogue, the exchange of knowledge, technical and financial cooperation, and adaptation to climate change. So these integration and cooperation mechanisms must be strengthened, not only by country members, but also by external or in organizations. And I'm not talking about the funding. We need to safeguard these processes because we need to protect them. In Latin America, perhaps this takes more effort compared to other parts of the world. The integration it's more complex because of the political life in the region. I think that this is a key contribution within and without other organizations. The generation and creation of strategic alliances in order to share different activities based on lessons learned, activities, the implementation of new tools for an improved management of water resources. We need to strengthen technological cooperation with partner alliances or beyond Latin American borders. Double the efforts. For example, with SIC Plata, we are planning to execute a memorandum of understanding that will help us bring together two very important basins in South America. Then the technological and scientific knowledge, the understanding of ground and surface water is very important. The strengthening of technical and institutional capabilities is very important. We don't have a lot of funding lines and CAP, IDB, the World Bank. We need to have more credit line facilities for these resources and for these activities. Public investment is limited, and therefore we need more funding to implement the actions. That is what we raised in the OTC action and strategic plan. And we want to do this in all our projects, and we have included these training and capacity building and institutional building capabilities. And very briefly, let me pinpoint that some countries, we are in the process of implementing these actions. For some countries, it's going to be more relevant, our work. Guyana and Suriname, for example, we are providing the creation of institutionality. That is to say, compared to other countries, within other Amazon countries, in other countries, we are strengthening because they do have water authorities. There are these imbalances, and we need to bridge these gaps within our own country members, but we are moving towards this integration. And, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Alexandra. It's quite clear, and we have recorded what you have mentioned, and be sure that CAF will support all your initiatives. Now, Alicia, please, if you can share your view. Yes, thank you. One of the major advantages in Central America, and we need to tap into it, is the fact that we are part of an integration system. As a result, we can have the Central American Agricultural Council in dialogue with us, the Health Council, the Water Fund, the Council of Environmental Ministers. So this means that we have this integration or this two-way dialogue, because water is not just a topic that has to be addressed by the Water Authority. We have different pillars, the ecosystems, the laws, the regulations. So the Central American integration systems provides this great space where we can bring together all stakeholders and connected among themselves. So the Council of Presidents, which is the maximum authority of the integration system, can establish different guidelines in partnership with all the country members of these organizations. So we really believe that we need to take advantage of this space. Also, we need to know that water management and integrated water management calls for funding, adaptability to climate change exacerbations, and therefore we need funds for the development of infrastructure, for protection works, for the building of dams, for the protection of the basin, management plans, etc., etc. So we need to work in a very, very coordinated fashion. And when we talk about financing, we want to have, if we want to have informed policies, we must know that we need accountability, and adequate accountability of the water resource. And for this, we need observation networks. I'm talking about observers at river level and robust networks, so that these decisions with regard to water volumes be relevant. So this is a challenge in Central America. We need to strengthen these observation networks so that volume level information be part of hydric balance activities, because at the end of the day, this is used by decision makers and in order to implement the necessary licenses. And, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Berta. And now, Juan Carlos, if you can share your view very briefly about the transboundary agreements, water transboundary agreements. Thank you, Edgar. We believe that in order to have feasible governance, we need to have a reliable international scenario that encourages cooperation. As a result, we need to promote the development of trust in our region. We have established, for example, coordinated research programs, technical financial cooperation agreements, different consultation fora, and SIC is currently promoting these and building confidence, which is the foundation for an appropriate environment to move towards cooperation agreements. We need to increase communication channels among the country members so that the insights about uncertainties are the foundation for these cooperation agreements. But one of the key aspects for building transboundary cooperation is the establishment of planning mechanisms in partnership. Different use, different members, countries, taking into account the vulnerability of our basins. So we also need to highlight that the creation of institutionality is always difficult because there is confrontation from different national and subnational existing infrastructures, and that's why it is important to consider that in order to move forward, we need to use the already existing capabilities and knowledge in our countries and reach consensus and shared plans for a transboundary cooperation. That is to say, creating new institutionality is something very complex, but in the meantime, we can take advantage of what we already have in place and leverage those as well as the competencies existing in our countries. Also, with regard to financing, as it was mentioned by panel members, if we go back to the UNFCCC and the COP, the Paris Agreement, we need to be clear that developing countries have resolved to contribute. No, he corrects himself. Developed countries must make contributions for developing countries to reach their national determined contributions, NDCs, and we need to include them in our own plans. These are some thoughts. Vertical funding and removing red tape from this vertical funding on the part of different developed country institutions. Thank you, Edgar. So thank you, Juan Carlos. Very valuable insights, particularly what you mentioned at the very end. As a region, it is important to raise our challenges and bring them to the international forum. Mitigation, adaptation, balance. Our countries perhaps we are aware that adaptation is more important in our countries, and we need funds for that. That is very clear. So the idea is that we still face in our country some governance issues in different countries, which have to do with institutional weakness. However, there are some success cases that have been documented that can serve as an example for establishing this institutionality, both at a political, economic, social level. We are moving forward towards governance process with regard to water are flexible, dynamic, and must be accommodated to the regional circumstances and to the circumstances that the planet is undergoing in, more specifically in our region as a result of climate change. And these key messages can become or can be translated into strategies as the Del Plata Basin Group is undertaking. And, well, as we are short of time, I am wrapping up the panel, and before, again, my thanks to Alexandra, Berta Alicia, and Juan Carlos, warm hug, and, well, I look forward to seeing you soon. Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Edgar Salas, for this great moderation, and also our panelists, Alexandra Moreira, Berta Alicia Almedo, and Juan Carlos Alvaralde, for this discussion on governance in the management of water resources. Greetings to all the attendees, representatives of governments of Latin America attending this conference of finance and governance of water towards Dakar 2022. From the government of Colombia, we're working on an ambitious agenda with different pillars to achieve the SDGs on 2030. Especially, we launched this year the book Colombia the perspectives and challenges, including the perspectives and challenges to improve ahead of the SDGs and meet the universalization of water and sanitation public utilities sustainably, continuously, and guaranteeing equality for all the inhabitants of the country. This strategy has 4 pillars. The first one, guaranteeing that differentiating schemes are deepened, breaching gaps to ensure that the breaching of this gap between urban and rural areas is reduced. And also allocation of resources for infrastructure. Colombia has allocated its highest budget to achieve this, around 1.3 billion pesos, and therefore ensuring the necessary resources to bridge this gap. Third pillar, regionalization of public utilities. We have to guarantee, and we're working through our programs so that more companies in our country are regional, providing better services, and also here and in Latin America. And fourth, sustainability of our sectors through these programs and the connection between supply and demand sectors, more connecting. Therefore, we are building more tools to generate higher investments and therefore guarantee sufficient supply to our users and more sustainability. This is an agenda for a stronger sector, sustainable towards 2030. The agenda setting the foundation to have this debate as a region, to have more fruitful fora towards Dhaka 2022. Ministry of Housing, Territory, and Environment. Warm greetings from the Republic of Panama. A sensible definition could say that water is a source of water and human progress. A limited resource essential for the development of all forms of life. It is a national resource of public use with regional impact and global impact. It is mainly a human right and one of the sustainable development goals that best improves the quality of life of people and the environment. We therefore, as a country, consider that the need to confirm its national and global commitment to water sustainability, creating understanding among our countries through the certification or of policies with innovative approaches, nature-based solutions supported in technological development, AI, and the promotion of new management models, facilitating access to multiple sources of financing. More integrated management of knowledge based on science and evidence, and mainly participate in management of water for better governance as a natural element, economic resource, and social asset. We therefore know that we have great challenges with better opportunities. You can count with this small and great country, Panama. Thank you all. God bless you. Now we'll continue talking about governance, but now focus on drinking and water services and sanitation services. We'll have Mr. Sergio Campos, head of basic water and sanitation division of the Inter-American Development Bank. Whenever you want, you have the floor, Sergio. Thank you, Alejandro. I'd like to thank you and the CAF for the organization of this great event, to invite us to talk about issues of governance on water and sanitation service provision towards DACA 2022. Just to give you a context, one of the main challenges is access. More than 200 million have discontinued water supply. In all our cities, we can see informal settlements, shanty towns, young neighborhoods. There's also inequality in water provision, in drinking water provision, not to mention sanitation, where more than 2/3 of our populations in Latin America do not have proper management of sanitation in terms of SDGs, with important inequality levels. In the age of COVID, we was stricken by COVID. Our companies were not ready. Most people have face masks and sanitation jars, but not drinking water or water to wash their hands. The companies had nothing ready to work remotely. Reconnections had to be provided, and income went down due to social distancing measures implemented. And climate changes, we were reminded in previous panel, and droughts in the Caribbean, which affects not only our environment, which will need to be improved, but also drinking water service provision. This is the context, and for this panel, I have the pleasure to have the participation of the president of SUNASIS, Ivan Luisi, the General Director of National Water and Sanitation Companies Association, Hugo Rojas, and the President of the National Association of Public Utilities and Communication, ANDESCO from Colombia, Camilo Sanchez. Ivan, Hugo, and Camilo, welcome to this panel. Let's start with a general question for the three of you. What do you consider the main challenges in terms of governance faced by water and sanitation provision companies in the three institutions as association of companies? And also, what are the measures taken in the areas to address these issues? Ivan, you have the floor. Thank you, Sergio. It's a pleasure to share the panel with you. Thank you, CAF, for this invitation. I'd also like to greet Camilo and Hugo and all the viewers. The question that you pose as a challenge, I think that eventually, and as we observe in different countries, water companies need to adjust their structure, their organizational structure, to governance, water governance challenges, and also promote a suitable organizational culture for the structure to face these water governance challenges. Even though great progress has been achieved in the region on issues regarding management beyond provision, but responsibility or accountability, what we see is that the organizational structure of the companies cannot meet these challenges from adjustment to climate change processes, or the need to serve the population without access to the water network through non-conventional systems, or the need to integrate neighboring populations through water and sanitation systems. So I do believe that the main challenge is connected, highly connected to the organizational structure and culture of water companies themselves. We always consider that the first thing companies should do is to be aware of the region, the territory where water is provided, and also the stakeholders and different water users, irrigation users, energy users, or power users, and establish relationships beyond direct responsibility with the population in the peri-urban region, to supply them with non-conventional systems and the neighboring populations that need to integrate their systems. And of course, with the farming communities in the basins where water is provided, sharing benefits on its use. Another great challenge is to participate and promote participation of water companies in multi-stakeholders, agencies, basin councils with specific tasks such as action plans on before droughts and flooding, and everything related to climate change risk and management, increasing therefore technical capacities, manage circularity of water. Here we see ahead of users, it is important to increase credibility on the water ecosystem services by users of sanitation systems, which implies managing sanitation services focused on the users. This action should also affect regional local governments and user organizations. We need action with government levels, which will imply efficient communication with users. Now, regarding SUNASS, as a regulatory organization, we're including the drinking water rate to compensate farming communities on water management and sediment control, to finance projects to restore ecosystems. This mechanism is called a service compensation system for ecosystemic measures, involving water companies of the different cities with the basic water and sanitation needs of farming communities, contributing to manage the possible social conflicts. And in addition, Peruvian legislation acknowledges the cost of opportunity to preserve ecosystems and also integrate these systems and processes of sanitation beyond the scope of responsibility of the water company to address to meet the needs of the most vulnerable communities or rural area communities. Another measure that highly contributes to governance in the basin is the definition of the provision area. Another role of the regulatory body, try to see, analyze the population dynamics and the establishing of groups, community groups, to know where the future markets will expand, generating predictability and eventually finance bridging the gap with a future rate that will guarantee the recovery of or the return of any finance. Thank you. I would also like to mention that SUNASS also has the power to supervise. As a regulatory body, we establish corporate governance methodology to assess and monitor the compliance of the code and accountability performance manual. Thank you. Ivan will probably have the chance to further address this point later. And now, Hugo, I give you the floor. What are the main challenges in terms of governance from your point of view, from ANEAS, and what is ANEAS doing on this? Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, CAF, for the invitation and give us the opportunity to have such a moderator with us. My warm greetings to you from Mexico. I'm glad to have panel colleagues joining us. Hopefully, we'll can have further collaborative actions together. We identify specific important governance issues, even though they're not new in the country or at the level of Latin America, but have exacerbated because of the conditions Sergio mentioned. Pandemic has greatly affected us, and I think we're not the only ones. However, I do believe there's still the need to have effective participation of the population in decision making. Currently in Mexico, there are no water projects without social conflicts. So we have to rethink the way we have to consider society in project decision making and water management. There are cases around the world that are very interesting. Mexico could use them as social licenses where we would allow people, civil society in particular, to have a feasibility license to works. Another important challenge is the water financial system. We are reducing budget at federal level. Since 2016, we have reduced more than 85% the federal budget for water and sanitation organizations, service providers, and the costs have also increased due to an inflationary process we are experiencing in Mexico. We'll be closing around 7% general inflation, although you know that commodities for sanitation subsector are higher because we basically depend on the cost of electric power, which has increased more than 20% this year. This could not be transferred to a proper adjustment of rates and is thus seriously affecting the finance of water and sanitation services. We also need to not only to charge more to rates, but have progressive rates with incentives, with cross subsidies. This is very difficult to implement and to explain to decision makers, to lawmakers, considering all these situations we're addressing. It is important to establish co-responsibility of financing through proper rate payment, how to convey to society that this is important, something that is required for basic service provision. In the pandemic, we could see that having water service was essential. We also include governance of community services. In Mexico, we need to include the communities, to include them in water management services, not only focusing on middle and large cities. There's a difference in Mexico between rural and urban of 2,500, and I suppose the same difference applies to other countries in the region. Also work on transparency, accountability, participation and inclusion, four important lines of work, providing reliability on the decisions made by the government. We also need in Mexico, in terms of governance, the legislation of water human rights in Mexico. It has been included since 2012 in the Constitution. Since then, we decided that it was important to legislate in 180 days this, but we have a 9-year delay, which has not allowed us to define the responsibilities of each sector of society and the government. In Mexico, the basic responsible of water provision is the municipalities, and this is the weakest link both in institutional capacities and economic sources, and we need to strengthen this. And then the belief that with least and proper institutions in abstract we can achieve good resources of good management resources. It's not enough in Mexico. We're just updating regulation for wastewater discharge. It is a good law. Of course, everything trying to reduce contamination is good, but we are currently not able to achieve this. These are parameters that are too high, and the amount of resources we'll need is not available. There's no approach on how to cover this cost. And it's concerning because it's part of the same situation where we don't have a financial system that covers all this scenario. And also proper and economically feasible, socially feasible laws and instrumentation, proper instrumentation. If we don't strengthen before implementing, it will be complicated. These are the issues we are currently addressing. I'd like to also further develop some other issues later.
Camilo,
We can start with the second round of questions. So from your point of view, what are the main challenges with regard to governance, and what is Andesco doing to address these issues? Well, thank you again for this invitation by CAF. Colombians are very happy to have Mr. Granados chairing such important institution. Ivan, Hugo, thank you for joining us. And two things, Andesco is not known by you, and it is the Union of Unions of Public Utilities. We are talking about 160 enterprises providing basic water, sanitation, and water services that account for 7.0% of the GDP. Colombia underwent very, very important changes throughout the pandemic. We understood that it was very important to cover all, from the user to the president of the country, with regard to governance. We underwent very important processes. More than 1.2 million Colombians were reconnected throughout the pandemic at the expense of the enterprises, showing that businessmen, in addition to providing services and making a profit, were thinking in the social benefit. And let me tell you, we can start disconnecting water supply. We started being able to disconnect the service 1 month ago. And we considered that public health was very important. And the second most important health, to keep the health and water, the water health of the country, included this aspect. And our companies were prepared for this contingency. There were no disruption of public utilities in Colombia. On the contrary, we improved, and we saw how the national administration implemented policies. We are working with new technologies. At Andesco, we include energy, water, basic sanitation, drinking water, all the public utilities. We understood that we had to change. And we have an ongoing dialogue with the President of the Republic, with different organizations at local and regional level, and with the ministers, not only the Deputy Minister of Housing. I was President Santos' housing minister. And let me tell you, we did have public policies. We continued all the processes, and we didn't change as it happens in the rest of Latin America. We may call Guajira Sur, we may change the names, but the most important thing is that we have a consistent policy in place. And we do have regulations. CAF is a very important agency. We also have ongoing dialogue, as we do have it with the Ministry of Housing, in order to understand the policies. To disconnect water from the network, we needed their acknowledgement. When we needed to increase the cost of the rate, well, we had this discussion permanently. And when we talk about users, we needed to have new policies in place in order to provide effective responses for the users. And we have the GDS number 6 includes 100% coverage with regard to water and sanitation by 2030. In Colombia, we are covering 96%, but there are very far away regions, and we need to cover them. We are having this dialogue with those far away users, and we have a dialogue with the Congress, Law 142, that it's going to be amended, but during the elections it's not the right time to do this, and we are trying to avoid populist, either left or right policies, which are damaging for this sector. And we know that we must not have landfills, but it's true that we shouldn't have waste on the streets. So the environmental issue today is very important. And in Colombia, we have this prior consultation process. And there is no public policy with regard to prior consultation. And I am very pleased to report on behalf of Colombia that what is said about Colombia is not true. Public utilities worked perfectly well throughout the pandemic in Colombia. Thank you, Camilo. Well, very, very important issues that you raised. And, well, in this second round of questions to the panel, now I give the floor to Ivan. And as you mentioned before, a key aspect is the regulatory framework, surveillance, transparency, and the strengthening of regulatory agencies, as Camilo mentioned before. Now, responsibilities are shared between the national and subnational administrations. The supply of water and sanitation and solid waste management, which is municipal, but all state and national governments are also responsible, and there is no coordination. So how can we improve this coordination, this communication between these different levels of government? Well, we need to consider three aspects. First of all, what we are doing. Then, how we institutionalize this coordinating mechanism. And third, how we design an instrument that help us accomplish what we want. Well, when we talk about the conceptual aspect, we need to understand that on a specific territory, water plays different aspects, social, political, economic, or has social, political, and economic connotations. We need to understand them. We need to understand the roles and competencies of all related institutions. In Peru, the regulatory authority has a new role to determine the supply area, that is to say, the potential markets. And we have an instrument that has been designed to identify processes, and based on these, we need to develop all sanitation markets, establishing a priority and a sequence for the interventions with the involvement of the different levels of government. This provides a horizon frame for stability and long-term financing. Second, the institutionalization. We need an inter-institutionality mechanism between the regulatory authority, the suppliers, and the ministries or water-related authorities and the water authority, but under a 15-day oversight led by the chief cabinet minister. My impression is that to the extent that the president of the of the Council of Ministers, to the extent that this person monitors all the plans and the progress, we make progress. If not, no. And then the instrument. We must design an instrument to promote public administration, because at least in this region, we need to encourage the different service providers in different ways. And we need to have investment plan based on the determination of potential market definition, and so as to know the expansion of the networks, and municipal incentives to reward the quality of service accomplished as a result of the execution of these prioritized water and sanitation program. And another thing that we have observed based on our participation in the program is the creation of a regulatory authority that governs and seeks compliance with the agreement on the part of governmental authorities and providers, and to enforce the compliance and then grant the incentives. And let me underscore the fact that all participating entities must accommodate their structure because when we talk about universal coverage, adaptation to climate change, in addition to the plans and instruments, we must have an organizational culture. Thank you. Ivan, thank you very much. Hugo. In almost all Latin America, our regulatory frameworks must be improved, or in some areas must be planned. When we talk about cost recoveries, and that is what you mentioned at the beginning, we need to make transparent or make rates transparent, make the regulatory framework transparent, and not only with regard to costs, but the subsidy system. And as a result of these, companies can have a cost imbalance. So the regulatory frameworks are not very clear when we talk about subsidies and incentives. However, some companies, regardless of the existence of or not of these plans, succeed in implementing their plans, and we have clear examples in the region. So, which actions are being undertaken by Alias, or what are some of the Mexican companies doing so as, because in addition to making the necessary arrangements, which is time-consuming, what is Mexico or the different organizations are doing in Mexico? And something that we do not have in Mexico is a regulatory authority. We would like to have, like in Colombia, CRAC. I visited Colombia and had the chance of seeing how rates were defined with the different approvals from the various communities. In Mexico, each municipality establishes its own rates based on their own specific criteria, sometimes based on state laws or national recommendations, but and this is something that we see at the beginning, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. We need this regulation of water as a human right. We need to establish these responsibilities, and the truth is that the municipalities should not have the authority to establish the rates, is because they do not have the technical capability to do that. So what we are currently doing from my association, we are developing an application that we are going to share free of charge to the more than 180 service utility providers. And this application will help bridge the gap between communication, collection, and payment at all levels, in order to have some leak reports or to promote different campaigns, awareness campaigns to the population. And we believe that the application is going to be very useful. Currently, Mexico has been participating with the National Water Commission over the past 2 years. We call Escuela del Agua, Water School. And there is a change in this program. All the agencies were supposed to receive training regarding cost, etc., etc. But since 2018, we go to the different states, and each federation requires that training, and this has helped us replicate the training. And we have observed very interesting things. For example, some service providers that have a rate system that, as consumption increased, each cubic meter price was lower. So this structure was a perversive incentive. And as a result, we found out that, and then we tried to revert it. And we are also promoting support programs, but based on results. It's not just about having a good performance of certain works. But if we get some financing or some support, well, what we want the supplier to establish rates that are consistent with the costs that are indexed according to the inflation, that are transparent with regard to accountability and other things. There is a benchmarking strategy. As there is no national regulatory authority, what we do is we gather the information and share it out. And when the operator or a municipality wants to make an update of their rates, well, it will probably be considered as the most expensive. But with this benchmark study, well, it helps them determine or defend their rate increase. We have specialized advisory services as well in related matters. And we are also working with the authorities and other international and Mexican authorities, energy efficiency systems to reduce costs, because 60% of the cost of water and sanitation service supplied in Mexico is for energy. So therefore, we need to have a public rate in Mexico. Before 2018, we moved from a public rate to an industrial rate, and we believe that this is not fair. So these are some of the measures that we are currently adopting. Well, great, excellent. And then we are going to summarize all the aspects of this panel. Camilo, the last question before moving to the wrap-up.
Could you tell us about the actions at sector level in the absence of a regulatory framework to act according to corporate governance? Companies can take action independently to behave properly. So what was the sector process? What was the role you played as head of unions? And what are the coming steps? You have 3 or 4 minutes. Very short, because I want to say that sector action is an example to be followed in Latin America and the rest of the world. It is very important what we have done. It is at will. It was the companies voluntarily wanted to participate in the process, because when you do it like this, you are committed efficiently. This started in 2019. We have the technical secretariat. We have led the process, and it has been very important. These are 12 companies, but let me tell you that there are many more now with the possibility to participate. For instance, there are companies like EPM incorporated in Agua Popayán, Aguas Capital, in Cali, in Copasco, Leiva companies in Leivan. Very highly representative companies that are becoming the leading motivator for others to follow suit. We have to protect our basins, the main water source. We need to understand here that if we don't have water, there's no service, and therefore, as it has happened in the past, we cannot disregard where the water comes from. We need to do all green investment. We should not be only thinking about gray investments. People should rely on the fact that we can get to a P times Q clear, where users understand the transparency involved, and that they understand that it's not about increasing rates to get equality in water provision. There's also an interesting work with the Congress of the country. I was senator for 22 years, and I know the importance to avoid the Congress to be independent from government and executive decisions. We need to work hand in hand. Otherwise, there will be populist governments talking about free service. We need to maintain the payment culture. We need to maintain transparent and equal policies, and everyone should understand that when we are working. We have mixed private and public companies in Colombia. It has to be done hand in hand, otherwise there would be inequality. Public utilities have proved to be the best leveling in society, and we really appreciate to be a part of this technical secretariat, and will continue working to the benefit of water and be replicated not only in Colombia but in other countries. Thank you, Camilo, Hugo, and Ivan. Extremely fruitful discussion. Ivan was talking about not only adjusting the organizational structure to face governance, but also to change the culture, and I fully agree with this. It's not an easy challenge. He also mentioned the importance of involving everyone, all the agents involved, beyond the users, rural communities, and other water consumers. Also, changing the structure and culture. Hugo mentioned social licenses of works. It is extremely important because beneficiaries should be also part of the solution. Solutions should be tailor-made. The challenge we have ahead should not be met with conventional solutions. We need to work with non-conventional solutions. Again, he also mentioned budgetary restrictions from central government to promote the sector, and inflation, which is always consuming budgets, but also make payment transparency and avoid politics. The creation of new laws is not enough. We need to work on the enforcement, their enforcement, and also relate water and sanitation management with natural resources management. Camilla mentioned the importance of technological innovation in management. And something very important, there should be an alignment not only among ministries but also the executive branch and Congress. If the political line definition is top and bottom, then everything will be aligned, and of course strengthen all the different stakeholders. And an important issue we mentioned water and water resources, but also solid waste, because it affects environmental management is involved, and without it, it could be questioned. Ivan also mentioned the importance to strengthen that governance of that link between subnational and national levels, the importance of having planning of long-term investments to close or bridge the access gaps, but also establish a formal mechanism of coordination and monitoring with a longer term, of course, but there should be coordination and design an instrument to measure public management efficiency. I fully agree with this. We also mentioned benchmarks. Including all spheres of action. Then with regards to the actions implemented and the development of an app for companies to have proper management is a technological leap that will help and be part of the change in culture. Rationalization of consumption, improved payment. The School of Water is essential. Our generation should bridge the gaps, and the coming generations should create efficiency. that should start now with schools of water and the benchmark issue. Associations as ANIAS can indicate companies where they are standing to get internal advice on how to improve. It's great to have a chapter on consultancy to other companies. And Camilo finally mentioned about the great action, sector action. I fully agree with him. It's an example not only for other countries in the region, but the world itself, where companies are aware of the politics involved in company positions and be a block as companies to implement proper and serious measures to improve basin management with green infrastructure that is essential for climate change, be more efficient in service provision to address the issues or the problems of pandemic, and be the source of sustainability in management ahead. For all the participants, it has been a great exchange where we have all learned. Again, I would like to congratulate CAF for the organization of this panel. Julian, Franz, thank you for the invitation, and I hope to be in touch with you to continue discussing these issues. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sergio, from the Division of Water and Sanitation from the IDB, and the moderation and final summary. Also, all the participants in the panel for this debate, where we can see the relevance of corporate governance in decision making, regulation, and water service provision institutions.
Charles Griffith, Minister in the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources. Barbados is classified as a water-scarce country. Despite this fact, the Barbados Water Authority, which is a state-owned enterprise charged with the responsibility of providing potable water and storage services for the island, is still able to supply almost 100% of the population on a daily basis. However, during the last 10 years, some of the higher elevations on the island have experienced prolonged water outages. The above can be attributed to an increasing high frequency of burst mains. Our aging transmission and distribution infrastructure dates back to 1856. It should be noted that the water outages are exacerbated by frequent droughts, resulting in a reduction of water production of 10 to 15%. To address this, the Barbados Water Authority has been managing water demands through 1. Water conservation, strategic mains replacement, water augmentation projects such as desal plants, and more efficient use of its groundwater resources. Our island is currently serviced by 2 sewage treatment plants operated by the Barbados Water Authority, and more than 20 privately owned operated packaged sewage treatment plants. Plans are in train to upgrade both state-owned plants to tertiary and advanced treatment levels. The Barbados government is committed to ensuring that our current classification does not in any way create impediments to the economic or social development to our country. I thank you.
Saúdo a todos e me sinto honrado de fazer parte desse momento como representante da Agência Nacional de Água.
As representative of the National Agency of Water and Sanitation from Brazil, we are happy to be a country with the largest water flows in the world. we also have important challenges to face. One of them, maybe the most important one, is that our water is not uniformly distributed, and in some regions we don't have water in the quantity and quality sufficient to for multiple use. This situation is aggravated by the increase of the population and economic growth. In other regions, like in the north, our dear state of Amazonas, the challenge has to do with the reduction on the effect of floodings, despite the abundant level. Distribution is unequal in time and space. So managing water resources is a constant resource for our nations. In addition to supporting the 2030 agenda of United Nations, we are trying to help countries to be better positioned for SDGs, especially number 6, guaranteeing water sustainability and sanitation for everyone. Among the actions addressed by the countries, the sanitation strategy for universalization of sanitation to guarantee the service of 99% of the population and 90% with collection and treatment of sewages until 2023. ANA, the National Water Agency, has a regulation for the sanitation sector, providing legal security to attract the necessary investment. Even within the 2030 agenda, we have we're in partnership with the United Nations with a support tool for the decision making to achieve SDG 6. We have implemented this year the tool, and evidence has shown where we should focus our efforts. CAF is also helping us, and it's important to be together. As with this meeting today, hope you have excellent conference. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you, joining you in this conference of financing and governance of water. There couldn't be sustainable development without sustainable water. And it's clear that in our region, access to the
millones de personas. Aún millones más no cuentan con servicios.
Even more need sanitation. We have seen how during the pandemic there have been great investment infrastructure. 5% of GDP has been invested in development, but if we had managed to avoid the disasters 10 years prior to the pandemic, 100% of its water services could be available, and 60% of power services and 30% of transport infrastructure. We are facing in our region complex challenges, change risks that endanger our systems, and therefore the guarantee and respond to these demands is extremely important. Building resilient infrastructure, resilient investment, integrating financing decisions, the risk and challenges for sustainable development is more important than ever. Our region aims at 80% of urban population. Within 50% would be located in highly flooding areas. So we need to increase resilient investment. Our organization, supporting the countries and following a mandate, we will join these countries in this challenge and achieving resilience and sustainable development. Thank you very much, and all the best in this conference. No falta. We head now to the final panel of this Conference of Finance and Governance of Water in Latin America and the Caribbean towards Dakar 2022, organized by CAF. Following our focus on governance, we'll see the implications on disaster management. We have, as a moderator, Mr. Jorge Wernick, Director of the Water Regulation, Water, Energy and Sanitation Regulation Agency of Adasta in Brasilia. Mr. Wernick, welcome. You have the floor. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, CAF, for the invitation. We will continue talking about governance, but now in terms of water-related disasters. In this panel, we have the participation of Claudia Herrera, Executive Secretary of the Coordination Center for the Prevention of Disasters in Central America and the Dominican Republic, Pedro Palacios, the Mayor of Cuenca in Ecuador, and Roberto Geraldo, Director of Engineering and Works of the Water Department and Power in Sao Paulo. I'll now go straight to the floor, to the questions, to the first round of questions. The first one for Claudia. Governance in water disaster related management requires intersectoral and multi-level approach. As the Center for Coordinating Natural Disasters in Central America and the Dominican Republic, from the Central American Integration System, SICA, how you coordinate the participation in managing water-related disasters, especially planning and prevention of risks. The different stakeholders, considering the different levels like national government, subnational government, and civil society. Claudia? Thank you very much. Well, good morning. On behalf of our organization, I would like to thank the possibility to share our progress and also challenges in response to the emergency and adjustment to climate change. I would like to greet the members of the panel on governance of water-related disasters. First of all, I'd like to highlight that the strengthening of governance on integrated risk management has been a priority and confirmed by our head of state. Central American policy on this is a main pillar for integrated risk management and ratified by our president in 2017. The main pillars, measures, and priorities agree with the commitment within the global framework on reducing the risk of disasters and the emergencies that in a short period have exacerbated the impact and made the tasks to address more complex. Our region is exposed to multiple threats, and given the increase in frequency and intensity of adverse natural events as climate change advances, we especially address our preparation to face these issues and transform the development agenda so that it's sustainable and resilient. In general, our region is known by the abundant water resources, though the changes in the rainfall patterns and the increase of non-rainfall periods and intense rainfall has meant an important impact on the population given the reduction of rainfalls for domestic use, farming use, and energy or power use. In the different panels, mentioned the impact of droughts, the million-dollar losses by this effect there has been damage of over 70% of our crops, affecting more than 2 million people. In 2019, there were crops losses of up to 50% of areas in the dry section of the region. In the last decade, the region has advanced in managing risk, reduce impact with better institutions, creating protocols of strategic improvements, and we continue working to increase the strengthening of preventive actions. I'd like to highlight that we have increased the our work on preventive actions, promotion of interinstitutional work, integrating the region, which is pertinent for this complex phenomenon as droughts and floodings and multi-threats affecting our region. It is urgent to strengthen this preventive approach through risk governance, in harmonizing guidelines for managing extreme phenomena, increasing knowledge by the population, and the development of tools to accurate forecasting of these events.
The application of long-term measures, establishing clear policies and consistency between regional and national policies. We are aware that we need to improve the actions at the territorial level to reduce the impacts of droughts and floodings in the more exposing and vulnerable territories. We've been putting efforts in the institutional aspect, COMESCA, CAF, about Water Congress. We have promoted knowledge generation to build a plan to address in an integrated manner the impacts suffered as a result of the drought. I mentioned before the plan that we mentioned earlier this morning. All these intersector approach help us with this approach vis-a-vis climate change by strengthening mechanisms to generate early warning, forecast extreme weather conditions. We have developed a regional coordination platform that help us anticipate, forecast, or have more integrated actions, strengthening knowledge management and promoting the development of protocols. There are different initiatives underway. For the sake of time, I'm not going to mention them all. We are trying to put together a Central American water resource management to promote governance instrument both for risk management and also to manage drought policies at a country level, the establishment of regional guidelines, and the actions are broken down in 3 levels, national, regional, and local, and feeding back the information. We are working on transboundary risk, basing risks, and we are gathering on-site or on-field information to feed early warning systems at a national level and articulate them to our response plans and make them more consistent with regard to the exposure and vulnerability levels. Strategy, training, and in the farming area we have more than 140 well-documented practices that we want to share and take advantage to adapt them to crop diversification and to have more consistent early warning systems. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Claudia. Pedro Palacios. Now, the following question from your authority. how is Ecuador planning the urban development with a risk-based approach, and which are the institutional actors involved, and how is the population informed in a timely manner of any disasters? Thank you, Jorge. My pleasure to meet you all and greet you all. And from this basing governance, we try to align them with SDG 2, 4, 6, 15, 14, and 13 through a governance plan. One of the pillars is a basing that is environmentally friendly. And we have two areas, the soil use and management, and the other one is the territorial arrangement plan. It's a macro planning system where we define the inhabited, non-inhabited, commercial, environmental protected areas. Cuenca is crossed by 4 rivers, and that's why we need to have a macro planning, and the soil use and management plan help us to determine the occupation of soil and what we can promote in terms of use. So through the risk management, we have a cross access that allows for urban planning or any topic, for example, popular consultations that we did early this year for the protection of water sources against mining exploitations, or other minor issues for an efficient use of water, drinking water consumption. And we work with parochial organizations, community organizations, to understand that the expansion of farming borders cause severe damage. In May, 2 rivers increased their volumes historically, 11 times more of the maximum level that we have considered as risk level, and that triggered an important alert. And we use early warning systems. We have different meteorological indicators that measure the flow and the volume of each of the rivers, and through the monitoring systems and on-site observation and communication means, with the benefit of the networks and technologies, we reach the population, the communities. As I mentioned, in May 2021, we had this increased level and overflow of some of the rivers, but the early warning, based on the planning that we had implemented over the past years, we were able to respond in a consistent and timely manner. There were no casualties, and that was a test because it was our first test, and it proven very successful. The indicators of early warning allowed us to accurately determine these variables in a timely manner, and the way we communicated, and then the way we respond after the disaster, because we need first to save lives, and then when the level goes back to normal, help us to build the necessary shelters or to provide medical care and health care, food services for the people that have been affected by the tide. And we serve these, or we were able to define the working plan. Everything is articulated by the National Risk Management System that follows the different levels. But within our state, we have different institutions that belong to the municipality of Cuenca, and where we articulate For example, the Risk Management Office, the Security Council, ETAPA, which is the telecommunications, water and sanitation company that coordinates all these processes, particularly in connection with the water cycle and its indicators. So we have a public policy and that crosses all the areas, plus the communication methods, taking advantage of the communications, have helped us to have a response to risks, as it happened in the past month. So in a very succinct manner, this is how we are managing things with regard to early warning, planning, and communication at Cuenca. Thank you, Pedro. Lupercio. From the Sao Paulo Water and Electrical Energy Department. How do you implement the hydric resource policies, and how do you coordinate the integrated management of the hydric resources based on the crisis that San Pablo underwent over the past decades? So what are the policies in place, and what are the adaptations and preventions in place for these events, and which were the measures to mitigate potential conflict between water supply and to generate energy? Please, my friend Lupercio. First of all, thanks to CAF for the invitation to participate in this panel. Big hug to all my panel members. Well, initially, let me tell you that hydric crises are recurrent in several parts of our country because Sao Paulo is the most heavily populated state. 45 million, shortage of rainfall requires to keep the level. So the cities that are dependent on surface water for public supply use rationalization. The Water Institute has acted in an integrated manner with all the governmental levels, particularly our licensor and also with the Secretariat of Agriculture. With regard to the use of irrigation, we need to put in place rules and procedures to address this problem. Our involvement is basically preventive. We try to avoid or prevent hydric crisis. In 2014, we had a very severe hydric crisis, and we learned a lot. Today, the scenario is more comfortable. We implemented many public works to mitigate or to adapt ourselves to this problem. The water and electric energy supply is also very resilient, and we try to implement different mitigation measures. We have deep digging processes. We also clean up our water sources. We have a program in place to keep water or to make water available for all uses. And when we talk about public supply and power generation, we need to highlight that Brazil has an integrated energy network. The federal government has implemented measures to avoid any kind of power rationalization. and we keep control of power plant reservoirs. In Sao Paulo, Sao Paulo participates together with the federal government in the decisions, because our role is to ensure supply for the inhabitants and to rationalize the use of water in all its for all its purposes. Thank you, Lupercio. We have very interesting experiences, but it's not the right time to talk about this. Let me ask this question to Claudia. Which actions are being underway or planned to address coastal areas that have huge tourist and economic impact, given the strong winds that are the result of the climate change? Well, we need to highlight that we are in the Mesoamerican reef. We are the second largest reef in the world, and barrier reef, and this includes 4 countries, 1,000 coastal kilometers. It's key to protect this for biodiversity purposes. It's unique, the biodiversity, but it provides ecosystemic services that are very important for the development of our communities. 2 million people rely on these, on the resources of the reef for their survival. And the reef plays an ecosystemic role, which are very important for protection of the coast when we face very strong storms, for local fishery, and that's why we are putting together some efforts to identify the causes and develop strategic actions to curb, together with UPESCA and other sectors, pollution, excessive fishing, sedimentation, and have a more sustainable coastal development. The region is highly vulnerable to climate change, exacerbating the pressure of anthropogenic threats. This area is also threatened by contamination, urban settlements, and inadequate tourist practices, and changes in land use, and the increasing temperature, water temperature increase, the increase of sea level, tropical storms that are more recurrent, more intense, pH changes in the sea, and other conditions that are increasing vulnerability and exposure. And that's why we are strengthening relationships with the tourist industry. We are developing different tools to include risk tourist indicators for early warning, for example, that are very important to avoid the loss of lives, reduce economic substantial losses from disasters, and to respond to the people affected by losses. We are strengthening the actions to increase the knowledge of the risk to which our population is exposed. For example, there are different initiatives in Honduras and Nicaragua for different weather situations, prevention culture, raising awareness among the population, communication of early warnings, and the preparation of protocols for early warning to cover in a very consistent manner and include the more vulnerable groups. So we are working on this to respond and to recover in a resilient manner. After ETA and IOTA, we have a recovery observation that will provide and is providing very valuable information to include within the recovery and reconstruction system in Central America, but also as part of the national plans, and strengthen governance and an integrated management system, and promoting intersector communication, and also regional policy frameworks. We are promoting, for example, plans for continuous restoration, emergency response, but the response to hurricanes and the responses of the recovery part, we know that reefs are the key natural barrier against disasters, and we need to protect them against secondary damage, restore the reef, and we have the support for the rehabilitation and restoration, such as, for example, technical and scientific learning knowledge. We have a scientific network in place, and in our platform and virtual platform, we have different courses and information. We have an early response system to intervene in the emergencies directly, and have a reef restoration service, including hotels, all the added value chain, and company-related enterprises, and we are encouraging the commitment of the governments in the region through the development of more consistent policies and more systemic policies, and having the intersector, interinstitutional commitment to cover more areas, farming, specialized entities, etc., and that are aimed at a more resilient Central America and more environmental sustainable Central America.
Thank you. I'll now go to Pedro. Pedro, flooding management implies avoiding serious damage to the population or productive areas, but it's not always easy to control them, especially taking advantage of the excess for later use. How do you manage at Cuenca the water excess from floodings? The question is extremely important, and I mentioned that Cuenca is crossed 4 rivers north to south, Machanga, Turevanga, and Tarqui. And one of the issues that has been addressed in one of the Machanga's basins is generating dams for an ecological flow, so that the river has minimum flow, and so that during the summer we can have irrigation channels for production. And one of the issues is the control of flooding during winter when we have excess rainfall. Of course, we use those dams to treat water and guarantee its supply for the population. And finally, power generation. In this is experience we have had in this basin, and in 2022 we will start something similar in the basins of Uinkai River, where we face overflooding year after year. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, we have the management. We are in the Inter-Andean path in Ecuador, 2,500 meters above sea level. We have a special geography, and we have special streams, and we manage them because we wouldn't have strong winters, and therefore people would think that they could cover or build among the canyons or rain streams. So we have been developing this project to recover these areas. And a third issue, which is important to us in the consolidated areas where we already have larger populations, we are talking about the fifth facade, balconies, roofs, terraces. We can recover the green area because of urban development, especially in large buildings, shopping centers, etc. This is something that we are just starting because we have realized that by waterproofing the urban area through pavement and buildings, the streams flow more easily, and therefore we can generate extra infrastructure so that water can rainfall excess can run through easily. In the previous question, you were asking me about planning. Recover high basins through primary woods. Reforestation is essential. Taking care that the agricultural border does not extend more. Reducing water absorption should be recovered, and this is something we have been strongly addressing it. So we are talking about a number of activities that will probably not 100%, but ensure but control rainfall, water excess that during the winter creates havoc. Thank you very much. Now we go to Lopercio for the last question. Following the crisis in 2020, Sao Paulo has been at a standstill because of the rainfalls, with the strongest storm in 35 years, with serious consequences. What are the plans and programs implemented from your organization to increase resilience ahead of future floodings? And could you pinpoint the non-structural measures for better governance in extreme natural situations? The metropolitan region of Sao Paulo has currently 22 million inhabitants, and that figure increased, especially in the last 40 years. As a consequence, there has been waterproofing of land, eliminating natural water resource areas, reservation areas. So together with this unorderly increase, during rainfall seasons, there were floodings in different points of the city. And the water and electric power department has worked seriously in those critical areas of the city. There was a steering plan for the Tietê River and Metropolitan City Plan. That plan is reviewed every 4 years, integrating the main actions on the sub-basins of the Tietê River, enabling better management based on improved diagnosis and planning to be developed, and implementing solutions from the execution of works and services to non-structural measures addressed within this plan as recommendations for better drainage of rainwater, better and correct use of land in the metropolitan area, and training through environmental education on a continuous basis. We also maintain frequent river cleaning services on the main rivers that flow into Sao Paulo, operating and maintaining reservoirs or dams to stop the rainfalls. We are mentioning large pools. The situation room reports the city on probable floodings in the metropolitan area. We have regular reports on this, and that work is developed together with civil defense of the state. Thank you very much, Lopercio. We will conclude the panel with the questions previously. Agree with all of you, but I would like to mention to conclude that you have shared good experiences so that we can implement. We all know that the worst drought and the worst flooding is still to come. So we need to be prepared. We need to invest in resilience, in governance, and all the other elements that you mentioned during your presentations and the responses you gave. We should also know how much we're willing to pay for that, because there is a cost for resilience. And I will conclude now, because we will go into a further debate on this. Congratulations to CAF for this event. I hope we can join in Dakar 2022, and thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry about my mixture of Spanish and Portuguese. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Guarnec, for this wonderful moderation. And thank you our panelists, Claudia Herrera, Pedro Palacios, and Lupercio Ciroldo, for this discussion showing the need for appropriate governance for adjustment, management, and mitigation of water-related disasters in a context of climate change. Good morning. It's an honor to join you in the Conference of Governance and Finance of Water in the Caribbean and Latin America, organized by CAF. There's still gaps on access to quality water and provision and sanitation. For instance, 1 every 4 people do not have access to securely managed water supply, and 7 out of 10 do not have access to managed sanitation, safe sanitation. This has an impact on public health, aggravating the pandemic. We also see important increase of water contamination and the coastal area. There's also an increase in frequency of floodings and droughts associated to climate change. At CEPAL, we propose to change the situation and its inertia throughout the chain of water for human use through water transition promoted by all the countries. This water transition can be observed in the sustainability and the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals for 3 targets, promoting economic, social, and environmental changes. On the one hand, universalization of sanitation and drinking water access without leaving anyone behind to reach the SDG 6 and bridge the coverage gap in the region to 2030. We need great investment equivalent to 1.3% of GDP in these services. reduce negative externalities related to contamination or pollution. Universalization of access reduces pollution and methane emissions from wastewater. Reduce, third, the exploitation of the water resource and the growing conflicts through better administration. We don't have sufficient investment, and technical capacities are limited with inappropriate budgets given the size of the task ahead. There are no sufficient supporting elements to water management or have robust management and conflict resolution elements among the interested parties. Esteemed colleagues, CEPAL is available for all the countries in the region to generate evidence, define and design public policy instruments, support building this important challenge. Goals is a challenge and a mission to all of us.
Dear colleagues, I'm really delighted to participate in this conference on water finance and governance in Latin America and the Caribbean. At the OECD, we have long argued that the water challenge is, of course, an environmental issue, but also an important economic challenge, one that is critical to the health and prosperity of our societies. The scale of the challenge our regions, our cities, and our communities face is huge. Over 570 low-lying coastal cities will face a sea level rise of at least half a meter by 2100, posing a threat to more than 800 million people worldwide and likely to cost trillions of dollars a year in damages. Water pollution was identified as a challenge by 75% of the 48 cities that we surveyed at the OECD. The lack of clean water reduces economic growth by 1/3, and polluted marine environments directly affect billions of people worldwide that rely on the ocean to provide jobs and food. Scarcity is also an issue in many places, and it is estimated that a drought can potentially reduce a city's economic growth by up to 12%. And there is worse to come, unfortunately. We estimate by 2050, with a projected world population of 9.7 billion, of which more than a half will be living in cities, demand for water is set to rise by 55%. And the simple truth is that we are not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 6 on clean water and sanitation for all. So there is still much to be done, and at the OECD, we want to work with all partners to make that happen. This is why we are helping governments at all levels to implement the 2015 OECD principles on water governance through a checklist and an indicator system to assess progress and bridge the gaps. The OECD is therefore delighted to contribute to the 9th World Water Forum, in particular by co-leading the priority on means and tools of implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, join us in Dakar in March 2022 to develop the right water governance conditions to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Before going into the last block of the conference, you can review the highlights and share your views with the hashtag Hacia Dakar 2022 towards Dakar 2022. In the coming days, you will be able to see the videos of the presentations and panels through our websites. And to conclude, we are closing the conference with Franz Rojas Ortuste, coordinator of Water Agenda at CAF France. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Alejandro. It is a great pleasure to join you in this conference that has taken 2 mornings or 2 afternoons, depending on the region, with an important message, with the participation of 47 people with common interest, water security in Latin America and the Caribbean. Would like to especially thank the 11 authorities that we saw through videos, ministers, international institutions, and the 29 participants, moderators, panelists. Of course, the messages from our top authorities at CAF and the World Water Council. Talk about water is talking about life itself. We find water in everyday things, drinking water, washing our hands, consuming products that were produced through water. So when we talk about water security, we're going beyond SDG 6. It's dealing directly or indirectly with the sustainable development. It has to do with eradicate hunger, reduce mortality, contribute to renewable energies, support proper housing, and through these interconnections, help education of children that have drop out from school because they have to bring water to the households, and we could be able to review all the aspects that are related to water. This conference has confirmed that governance and financing of water is related, as Leon Suarez said, bidirectionally. It is symbiotic, dualistic. We cannot talk about finance without talking about governance, and vice versa, because any update or modernization of public policies need financing. I would like to highlight some important phrases that we got in this conference. First, I would like to pinpoint that water is a public asset. It is at the core of sustainable development. This has been mentioned by several speakers during these 2 days. It is also important to highlight that climate crisis is a water crisis because it alters the hydrological cycle of water with an impact on waterfalls, temperature of soil, etc. On the special rapporteur words, she said, it is a crisis of human rights. Water is politics, was said at the beginning, because it calls for common interest. It is a public asset with high economic, environmental, and cultural value. Investing in meeting water needs is investing in social peace. This is an important issue because the growing pressures on water resource. And if we do not have proper resilience and preparation, we won't be investing in coming social peace. Also, governance is the key to open financing. Governance is basic for sustainable development. Finally, something I would like to highlight. Latin America and the Caribbean could be a creditor of the environment given the vast capital of the region. We have made great progress, but there are still important gaps repeated throughout these 2 days. I'm not going to dwell into this, but there are 160 million people that represent 25% of Latin Americans and the Caribbean without safe access to water. That means that some do not have or have it in not proper conditions. More than 130 million do not have safe access to sanitation and therefore have sewage that do not treat wastewater and have septic chambers that are improper. And so most of the messages from the ministers highlight the importance of the universalization of water access, and therefore need to quantify investments. There are several estimates on investments. CAF is working on updating the financing needs, and Julian Suarez mentioned that we require to fourfold investment. This involves financing effort, but also execution efforts to implement these investments. This would involve $26 billion a year only for water and sanitation. We heard from the colleague of ICE in Buenos Aires, but the need of $2 billion a year, which is around the region of these $25 billion we mentioned. The challenge is huge, therefore. We need to think where these resources come from, because of course we're talking about a considerable amount. And one of the recurring issues is the need of innovation, not only technological innovation, but also innovation in financing and the use of resources. Business as usual is not an option. I'd like to mention 8 messages that were said during the financing sessions, which are closely related to governance. First message has to do with efficiency in the use of gas. We need to increase accountability and transparency of the resources we already have that we can use, and also better allocation of subsidies to favor those most needed. And there's a global study showing that efficiency in the use of subsidies, whether supply or demand and consumption. A second element has to do with higher allocation of resources by the different states. Also, the progressive principle that was mentioned. A third message referring to innovation and the search for mechanisms, whether result-based agreements or performance-based agreements, and alternative means such as defined networks or distribution networks through operations to users to support getting higher finance, better finance. A fourth element has to do with further leverage. Blended finance is an option because development bank resources could be used to attract and catalyze commercial banking resources to increase available resources. We have experiences here in the region. Ivanovas in Mexico mentioned examples of blended finance applied, which no doubt need to be worked on in the region. Blended finance is highly used in energy. It is working also in farming sector, but we need to include it in water because we need to work through multilateral agencies and the different countries to favor this environment. And also, I'd like to highlight that the pandemic has taught us that structural problems and fragility of the sector, which was highly affected during the lockdowns, the need to explore a contingency fund closely related, as the Vice Minister of Bolivia said, with contingency plans or, based on the experience of Colombia, the response to natural disasters or pandemic conditions. No doubt, the opportunity from the COP26 results, the agreements from COP26, water should be used through the lenses of climate change, energy efficiency projects, circular economy projects, loss reduction projects, through adjustment or this could respond to work on droughts, reduction of pollution. COP26 message is important here. The $6 billion available for developing countries. Latin America should be ready to channel part of these resources. And as part of these commitments, as the president of CAF, Diego Granados, mentioned, CAF will provide $25 billion in the next 5 years for the work on biodiversity and nature-based solutions. Two additional messages had to do with rates, environmental rates, and reduce investment costs through cost-effective in technologies, the combination of gray and green technology, which could be more cost-effective, and also more affordable solutions such as septic tanks. It's not only about septic tanks without sewage system. If we need on-site solutions, this should be related to closing the environmental cycle and take sludges from septic tanks. With these solutions, we can achieve probably better results. How to attract financing? This is closely related to governance. We mentioned the de-ideologization of the projects. We need the state to guarantee in the shortest time access to water and sanitation, especially for vulnerable populations. So it should be state policies, not government policies. This is closely related to public policies. Somebody mentioned that we should not only have papers expressing a will, but we need institutions capable of implementing it. So an important issue has been the need to strengthen institutions with good governance to facilitate the proper use of resources. And we need, for that, clear rules, improved baselines, and also sustainable projects. Bankable projects, some say. We prefer to call it sustainable projects because they are not related to a profit, but sustainability. Therefore, goodwill favors projects, and we have good cases here with pre-investment projects in water. But public banks such as Banobras, within its cycle of projects, approaches pre-investment, an important issue. Something that we're working on and we should continue working on is to review creative ways to finance operators directly. I think that should help us think of good solutions for operators. For instance, projects that are related to reducing losses, energy efficiency projects, reducing costs from operators, and therefore the debt they may incur in. It is therefore important, as Vice Minister of Colombia mentioned, and also the Minister of Paraguay, the need to generate scale. At urban level, think of aggregation models, regionalization, urban regionalization models to sustain services. Some elements before going into the issues we discussed today. The importance of alliances, partnerships from financing, like the Water Financing Coalition, and partnerships as Modrasa, the Association of Regulators in the Americas. And everyone from their position could generate partnerships so to have higher voice, generating uniform an alternative voice in certain cases to have an impact on public policies. Particularly important during yesterday's session was financing to irrigation and the importance of a favorable environment but also an irrigation culture, also connected to the capacity to understand that water and land are the basis of productivity, also mentioned by the representatives that we had yesterday. The role of the state in financing. I would like to highlight here something that several of the panelists in irrigation mentioned, the importance not only of agro-industry, contributing to the economic development of countries, but also equality, with an impact on economic development and household culture, how to integrate small providers within an agricultural approach in the different countries. For that, we need to understand the differences between the large farmer and small farmers with differentiated policies. The representative of Proinversión from Peru mentioned the experience of promoting PPPs. For each dollar invested, there is the possibility of fivefold this private investment, and these are the mechanisms from irrigation approach could be important, in addition to promoting other incentives for policymakers, such as taxes and other mechanisms that lead the view of innovation from financing mechanisms. Finally, I would like to address the issues of governance. As mentioned, several of the participants, it is a balance between social and users' demands and the capacity of decision makers to breach this. These active mechanisms of demand and response capacity can be seen in the interaction of formal and informal agents or stakeholders. We see that water is strongly related to health, food, energy, leading to the need to coordinate among sectors and levels. The foundation of this governance is in integrated management of the water resource, which the region needs to advance in. Also, with this view on resilience, incorporating quality issues, some call the 2.0 water resource management, new view with appropriate mechanisms. We therefore need to work on adjusting regulatory frameworks, feasible institutional structures for the efficiency of water resources, the importance of a fourth element, separating elements between steering, regulation, the importance it has in some countries, the importance of separating steering, regulation, and service provision. And within each institution, work should be done for a proactive governance. An element that has to do with governance is participation of users at different levels, and this implies third-generation public policies, not only a top-down but bottom-up view. Users should also have an impact on public policies. We need to generate, therefore, coordination areas and opening participation of users. Finally, I would like to mention the importance of take politics out of the rate discussion, this integrated vision of the region on cross-border institutions. And the three institutions on basins mention working on planning, information, and generation of networks. The possibility of creating an understanding between the Amazonic and the Plata basins, two important basins for the region. This highlights the importance of networking on alliances, cooperation, South-South cooperation, institutional cooperation to increase efforts. For that, we need an environment of trust, reliance, joint work, and access to vertical funds, as Sam mentioned. So finance and governments are two elements that cross all the safe water that we aim at and that this region, Latin America and the Caribbean, need so badly. Thank you for attending these 2 days in our conference. Alejandro, the floor is yours. Thank you, Fran Rojas, for summarizing up the conclusions and findings of this conference. And after 2 very intense debate sessions with regard to water finance and governance, we are coming to the end. So now we give the floor to Christian Asinelli, CAF Executive Vice President. Mr. Sinelli, welcome. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, all the attendees to this event. I would like to raise 3 aspects. First of all, that our region is rich in resources and faces many challenges as well. 30% of water resources are in this region, but it's distributed in an asymmetric manner across the region. This region covers or accounts for 60% of the wildlife, but it's severely affected by anthropic activities and the effects of climate change. And while we have 20% of the world hydroelectric power, this is concentrated in some specific areas in the region. So the challenge is within SDG number 6, or is covered by SDG number 6. Secondly, it is essential to increase in a substantial manner the financial resources to bridge access, quality, and sustainability gaps. We need to have a propitious environment to attract investments by updating the regulations and planning and strengthening the capacity of the institutions, both at basin level and in our response to natural disasters. Governance of drinking water is therefore important to provide accessible and affordable services to the population so that no one is left behind. We see some regulators promoting nature-based solutions and circular economy solutions that expand the traditional scope that is in line with the challenges that we face with the climate change. CAF Water strategy is associated to climate change. We want to become the green bank for Latin America and the Caribbean. I believe that CAF plays a key role in the discussion and with regard to the view of Latin American and the Caribbean as regards the water view that will be submitted in the 9th World Water Forum next year. Again, my thanks to all the participants to this conference, sector authorities in each country, international authorities, panel members, moderators that honored us. From CAF, we are committed to strengthening water resource management and to meeting environmental targets to attain a sustainable development. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you at Dakar. After Ms. Asinelli's comments, we conclude this conference on water finance and governance. We look forward to seeing you again in Dakar 2022. Our welcome from CAF, the Latin American and the Caribbean Bank.